All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with Kyle Skalisky. Kyle, welcome. So awesome to have you on the show today.
Kevin, thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be here. I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
I am too. And I want to start by giving a shout out to there's Tamra and then at Broadcast Your Authority, but then also Katrina is who I work with, who's on
Right.
their team. And I love Katrina. I'll tell you what, every time I get an email from her now, it's kind of like Christmas time, Kyle, because I don't know exactly what's going to be in there, but I'm like, oh, it's going to be good.
Yeah,
and
yeah, they were wonderful to me. I was on
Yeah.
their show, the Broadcast Your Authority podcast. Taped that earlier this month. It'll come out in the future here, and then they are also helping me find other podcasts to get my message out about my
Yeah.
book.
And here we are, and
Yes,
here
sir.
we are. And I'll tell you, I really appreciated the conversation that we had earlier. We got to know each other, get to know each other a little bit. In fact, I remember when I first hopped on Zoom with you, I was like, great to meet you, Kyle. My brother's name is Kyle. And you're like, oh, really? My brother's name's
Name
Kevin.
is Kevin, right?
So I thought that was great. And so
Yeah.
well, I'll tell you, I am really looking forward to this conversation. And I am just so impressed with your background and with your history and with what you're doing now, too, and stuff, and just with who you are as a person. I have really been looking forward to doing this podcast interview with you, Kyle. So for everybody else who doesn't know anything about you yet, maybe they're kind of looking at the pictures in the background, maybe they're getting a feel for it, and but let me start off with before we get into your background. What do you do right now? What do you do, and who do you serve, Kyle?
Well, I've recently stepped down from being a president CEO of a company, aerospace and defense company called Check Six Aero Solutions, and now have reached that point in my life where I want to focus on giving back. And so I have my own consulting company called Wild Sky Aerospace and Management Consulting. And part of that is a book that I wrote, A Sky Less Traveled, Maverick Life of Leadership, Resilience, and the Pursuit of Purpose. And I want to use that book as a platform for me to get a message out about the things that I learned as a fighter pilot for 23 years, and then 15 years in the aerospace industry, doing flight tests and other things that were very exciting. But who I really serve, I think is my wonderful wife, Dr. Kyra Carpenter, and our two little boys, Wilder and Colt. They're 6 and 4 years old, and let me tell you, that's a handful, and something
I
that I
know
enjoy immensely. So,
it. I've got 7 kids of my own. I know right where you're at, Kyle. And so, so, okay, so let's go. So well, let me, before we do that, what inspires you most about the work that you're doing, Kyle, and the impact that you get to make?
you know, the it takes a long time. Experience is a great thing. But often what happens is people build up all that experience and they never have the opportunity to pass it on to the next generation because, right, somebody passed it on to us and we are able to stand on their shoulders and lift ourselves higher. And I just feel that there's a need for people that had the life experiences, especially I feel like my story is a good story. Actually, I think all people's stories are wonderful, and I wish more of us could tell them. And there
Yeah.
was a way to record them because I think there's value and there's lessons to learn from everybody.
Amen.
And
Amen.
so, I'm very much at that point where I would like to be able to lift up those other people in the next generation that's going to follow me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, those are the kind of motivations that I have.
Yeah.
And also personally, I wrote a book because I have those 6 and 4 year old boys, and I am an older father. And I don't know how long that, truthfully, that I get to be with those boys, growing up. And so I wanted to leave something to show, for those 50 some years before they were born, what their father did and what I believed in so that I could pass that message down to what my true legacy is which are, my children and my family. So,
Amen. Amen. Yeah. So let's, you weren't always a coach or a consultant. What is your backstory? How did you get into even doing this? How did you give us the backstory? Because you got a really
okay.
awesome backstory.
Well, I mean, I grew up in Wenatchee, Washington, right on the Columbia River, wonderful place, but it was small. And I grew up small. My parents got married at 16 years old and had six children by the time they were 29. And they spent a lot of their life taking care of their kids. And we didn't have much more other than what we knew about in the area that we were. But I knew I wanted to go do something bigger. And in fact, I write in the book, I didn't fly in an airplane until I was 17 years old, a senior in high school. And that first flight was I went to the Air Force Academy physical at Whidbey Island Naval Air Station. But I had a state playoff baseball game that afternoon all the way across the state. And there was no way I was going to make it. And I was going to let my team down. And a local orchardist named Jim Wade had a Cessna 172. He flew into Whidbey Island, picked me up after my physical, and flew me across the state. First time I ever flew in an airplane.
Wow.
And
Wow.
flying over the Cascade Mountains, seeing Mount Rainier, and then rushing to that game, landing, and I literally was changing into the uniform in the car in the dugout. And I was a third batter up in the game, and two guys on. I hit a three-run homer off of a future Major League Baseball player, and we win the game.
Wow.
And
Wow.
but what I did realize that day was, hey, flying was a transformative experience, even riding that first time. And then, ironically, the second time I flew, I left to go to the United States Air Force Academy because that was the only way I was going to get to college. We didn't have money as a family to go, and if we didn't find our own way through, succeeding academically and athletically or whatever that was going to be, that's something that my parents instilled in us, and all my brothers and sisters. We did accomplish that, and it's something to be proud of.
Yeah.
But from there, when I was at the academy, I got exposed to things that, small town guy that never traveled more than what the family station wagon could take us in. Then the world became a much more interesting and a bigger place for me. So,
Yeah.
from the academy, I realized, from the summer programs that I was pretty good at flying airplanes, and I found my passion and I found what I wanted to do at a young age. And I know
Yeah.
not everybody gets to do that. And I encourage, people to never give up on dreams and not to settle for where they're at. And if there are things
Mhm.
that they really need to do or want to accomplish, that they shouldn't give up on that because you never know what you're going to find
Yeah.
if you give yourself the opportunity to take that chance. And
Yeah.
and for me, it was flying airplanes, so I stumbled into that, had no idea. And for the next 23 years, I was a fighter pilot. Flew the F-15 operationally around the world. Was an F-16 aggressor, which is the adversary, the bad guy, that trains our combat pilots. And then
Okay.
I did an exchange tour with the U.S. Navy, and I flew the F-18 in operational flight test. From there, retired after 23 years, went to Raytheon. After I had some small businesses of my own, I did take a few years, entrepreneurial spirit, I guess, and developed that something new that I'd never had. I actually owned a Great Harvest Bread Company franchise, so I had a bakery of all things.
Huh.
Was
Huh.
a co-owner of a pro indoor football league team, that played in Wenatchee, Washington, in the
Okay.
indoor new arena. So that taught me a lot about, hey, when it's your own money, you certainly think through more about how you're spending it, and it helped
Yeah.
me, I think. When I then went back to industry and worked for Raytheon and Mitsubishi Aircraft, running their flight test programs and flying as a test pilot. So those experiences, I think, carried over very well into then managing, other people's money in addition to your own,
Hmm.
and running good programs. From there, I started consulting and ran this small aerospace and defense company that I did. And that's kind of where it got me. It all came about because I was able to find that which I not only was good at, but it gave me a good life. It gave me good compensation, maybe not always financially, although it was always good.
Mhm.
But it gave me travel to see the world that I never would have seen otherwise. And I think there's growth there, there's compensation in that alone.
You
And it
bet.
also gave me growth because it put me in rooms with people that I don't think I ever would have met or I would have seen. I've met
Yeah.
presidents. I've seen four-star generals and admirals in rooms making decisions that change the world, and watching how those people operate, influenced me greatly. And I think that is compensation in itself as well.
Yeah. You
And I was
bet.
lucky to have that. And then finally, I always say, and I write about it, and it's not good enough to be good at something and to get compensated well, but it really has to bring you joy. You should get up and look for
Amen.
not elation in the sense that, oh, short term, I'm happy. It's just something that motivates you, that you want to go to work every day, and you enjoy those challenges. And even when things are bad, through the hard work you're going to succeed. And it's because it brings you so much joy you can fight through those tough times as well. So
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
me, that's how I got to where I am today.
Wow. That's a heck of a story. That is a heck of a story. Um, and for my next question, you don't have to name names or anything. But what's an example of a result that you have helped a client get that you are just incredibly proud of, Kyle?
Um, there's probably two examples.
Okay.
One was when I left the military and I went to industry. Um, I was working for an experimental research and development test airplane that Raytheon had. At that time, it was transitioning from a single customer that had always paid for everything, and everybody got complacent that, oh, there was always this government money that was coming to keep it going, to the point where that customer said, we don't want to be exclusive use anymore. We're not going to pay for it. And taking a team that was used to doing something in a certain way and having to redefine what the mission was, what the vision for what we were going to do with this incredible asset, and then trying to create a new organization around it, and build the values that would support that. To me, it was about a 5 year task. That after 5 years, I finally was sitting in the office one day saying, "This team doesn't need me anymore because they can do this without me, and they're doing a wonderful job." And that's one of my proudest moments. We reorganized and redefined ourselves, rebranded, if you will,
Yeah.
to the point where, hey, we had to go out and advertise that we had this capability to other programs, within the Raytheon corporate business, and let them know that, hey, there was a new way of doing business. And not only that, we had to restructure our team to support that business in taking on multiple test projects. So having test project managers, an engineering team that could do the things that needed to happen, the way the pilots and the maintenance team worked, just putting together that rebranding, and then making that asset now, instead of supporting one program, I think in those years supported over 15 or 16 programs that were worth billions of dollars in sales to Raytheon, that
Yeah.
otherwise wouldn't have had this test bed aircraft to make that product better for the end user, which ultimately was the warfighter.
Yeah.
And for me, that was always a motivation in my career is, how am I going to help my fellow warfighters? And even when I wasn't one anymore, it's still something that motivates me every day. And so
Yeah.
that was one that I was very proud of.
That
The other
is
example was that Mitsubishi aircraft, when I realized, hey, they don't need me at Raytheon anymore. I'm not the kind of guy that's just going to sit in a position and the status quo. And so I took a new challenge.
okay.
Mitsubishi was trying to certify a new regional jet for the airlines, one that, the Embraers and the Bombardier CRJs, that Horizon Airlines and SkyWest and the regional airlines fly. And it was a program that was having problems, and they brought in some experts in flight tests to come in and help get that program on the right track. And
Okay.
and I took over the program management and the flight test team, and immediately saw that, hey, we had to prioritize again. We had to identify, and again, it comes up over and over, the mission. and the vision for where we were going, and then putting in place the processes and procedures to get there. Within the first month, a program that for the previous 5 years had never met its schedule or been on budget in a 5 year period, we, for the next 6 months in a row, met schedule and we were under budget.
Wow.
And
Wow.
just through refocusing the team, aligning, the task to the priorities, and, giving people a clear idea of what they did and why it was important to the mission, it just aligned the focus. And next thing you know, boom, I would like to say, I think it was the best flight test team in the business, better than, anything that Boeing or Airbus or Bombardier or Embraer or any of those large OEMs have. Um, I think we put together the best flight test team in the world at that
Yeah.
point.
Wow. Wow. So now I'm curious, who is your ideal client that you can serve now, Kyle? Is it solely people in or companies in the aerospace industry, or are there other companies that you've helped too that you're
No, I think aerospace, is certainly what I know. And if it's about flight operations, flight test, aircraft maintenance and leasing, those kind of technical details,
Yep.
I very well suited to help any company that's, mid-sized, especially mid-sized and small companies.
Okay. Okay.
I think that are looking to how can we organize with limited resources to to find our niche in the market, and then how do we then go out and win that business? I think that's certainly one part, but the other part I think is the message that I write in the book. It's a universal message about leadership. It's a leadership and management, resilience, and finding purpose. So I think that's why I call it Wild Sky Aerospace and Management Consulting, because I think any company that's looking to how can we better align and how can we better organize? How can we define mission, vision, and values for what we're doing? How do we then construct a team that will work under those, under that mission, vision, and values?
Yeah.
What do you look for in the individuals that you're trying, to hire? And I write about that. To me, uh, good teams are teams that have people that have character. And you can't find that on a resume, and it's not always obvious in one sit down interview. It's something that comes out over time. It's how people treat those who can do nothing for them. It's how they treat people lower on the organizational chart, for instance, or,
Yeah.
you want people that have that integrity and character, that value and respect the people that work with them and or for them. But you can have a team full of good people, but if they don't have competence, they're not going to be able to do the job. So you need character, but you also have to have a team that has competence. But they don't have to all be superstars, and they just need to be people that can get the job done, but they're willing to learn and they're willing to continue to improve and get better. And that's very good, and that's what you need. But then again, there's a lot of teams that have good character and they're loaded with superstars, but they don't succeed because the third C is commitment. They don't have commitment to what they're doing. And so, putting together that character, competence, and commitment is a true leader. It's about the people. It's not about themselves. It's not about what they're doing organizationally. It's about finding those right people and defining that so that the people with the character, the competence, and the commitment to the job is when you will then succeed. So,
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, we've done a really great job at setting some context here. And so now that we've done that, I want to switch gears just a little bit. And I want to start talking about relationships. And so I want to frame that up. So I'm going to ask you a question. Kyle, have you ever met or been introduced to a person or persons who completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationships.
okay. I'm going to kind of do it in fighter pilots always do everything by threes. So,
Okay.
I'm going to give you my three. One is from a macro perspective or historical context. We're all influenced, or we have that person or persons in our lives that we think, wow, that historical figure is someone that I admire and I'd like to do. Well, I happened to get to meet mine, and that was President Ronald Reagan. He
Okay.
was at the Air Force Academy graduation in '84. Still remember walking up on the stage and him handing me my diploma and shaking his hand and it was the '84 election at that time, and I was like, well, it's an honor to meet you, sir, and I wish you luck in the upcoming election. And he did the old, oh yeah, I'm gonna need it. Well, it turns out he wins 49 out of 50 states and probably
Yeah.
the biggest landslide ever. It really didn't, but from that day forward, just the speech he gave that day, I quote one of the lines out of there that kind of embodied the way that I tried to want to live my life. To have impact. It's not enough to be a naysayer and somebody that just points out everything that's wrong, but you have to be a person who can bring forward solutions and kind of that message that he gave, that it was people that were on the cutting edge of aerospace technology that were going to lead the way, gave me motivation, and it kind of set the term. Plus, just personally, he shaped a lot of views to me about what I thought were, what were valuable, um, throughout life. I didn't think he was optimistic, but he wasn't, he understood reality. He was very charismatic, but not fake, and that's one of the things I just, do not like. He had these guiding principles, that you knew him, but he was willing to change, so someone that was going to be the Cold Warrior that nuked, the whole world was the first U.S. president to actually have a reduction in nuclear weapons, and he didn't box in Gorbachev. He gave him a way out so that communism would and the Soviet Union would eventually fail. So those defining traits became things that I wanted to embody and be. Especially the one that he generally liked people. I think that's important for any leader or anybody in a position of authority. If you do not like people, you're just not going to succeed. You got to generally like them. It's not an act, and you got to make people feel like that they matter.
Yeah.
And he did that. Everyone wants to have purpose. They want to feel like what am I doing is part of something bigger than me.
That's
And
right.
so from him, I got that.
That's
But
awesome.
most of us don't think of, oh, okay, presidents and famous people that more closer to me. I the people who really had the impact on who I became and why I am the way I am today are my parents. And I think that could be true for just about all of us, I hope. Like I said, my parents had some challenging times. They were married young. They had six kids very early in their life while my dad was still trying to go to college. My mom had to give up those dreams. But you know what? They never ever made it feel like they had to give up something for us. In fact, they felt like the true blessing was that they got to have us in their lives, even if it meant they didn't get to do everything that they wanted to do. To the point where, my father went to college and he already had two and then three kids. He was a athlete of the year at Central Washington University back in the 1950s. So he played football and baseball and in two sports. He worked a morning job before school, to make money for the family. And then when he was done with school and his sports, he went and was a bartender and he studied while he was a bartender all night until like 1 or 2 in the morning, and then got up again at 6 in the morning to go do his morning job. And just seeing that kind of dedication, to and responsibility to those around you, but at the same time, not giving up on what you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that really was impactful to me. And they don't take themselves too seriously, and they don't worry about what they have or don't have. They're
Yeah.
very content with what life has given them and what they've been able to do with it.
Mhm.
So I think those are important messages,
You
to the
bet.
point now where, my parents are both 88 years old and they just had their 72nd wedding anniversary.
Wow.
And
That's something to aspire to right
yeah,
there.
I mean, if I live to 72, I'll be
Right.
amazed. But the fact that they've been together and supporting each other and finding, that kind of love and dedication for someone else and for your greater family really has impacted me.
Yeah.
And it's made me realize that, even when times are hard, you don't give up on people. You work through it. You do the best that you can with that. So I would say, that's the example, and then giving back as well. So my dad probably, New York Yankee scout said, yeah, we were going to draft you, but we know that you already have kids and there's no way we could do that to you. And he didn't end up being a major league baseball player, um, which was devastating to him. But what he did do was turn it into being a school teacher and a coach, and he coached all of us kids to the point where my oldest brother ended up being a professional baseball player with the Philadelphia Phillies
Wow.
back in the
Very
early
cool.
70s. And so, he channeled what he didn't get to do into his children and
Yeah.
gave us
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And so, to me, that's very important. That relationship,
What a
it
gift. What a
yeah, it
gift.
is. And now to have a 6 and 4 year olds talking to, Papa and Mimi on
Yeah.
the phone every week when we chat, it's just something that I cherish,
Yeah.
and I think it's very important.
Yeah.
And then the third thing, the final one in there is, in the book I write of, finding joy in what you do. And, a lot of people talk about that, but what does it really mean? And some of that is learning to live in the moment. And that's an overused phrase often, but do you really take the time to take in what's in front of you right now? Are you able to let go of the past, learn those lessons, let go of it, but learn the lessons because otherwise you don't grow. It defines you. Don't let that pass. You can't change it. Don't let it define you. Some people are so far off looking into the future that they have all these goals and everything they're doing today is for some nebulous goal that's way out there into the future, and that's okay to have. You need to have a direction, but they forget to take advantage of the things that are happening in front of them right now today, and to take opportunities that may take you on a little detour in life, and that's okay because that's something that you may not have known about, and it may end up redirecting where you're going because it's where you
Totally.
find that joy in what you really do. And why I write about that is because as a fighter pilot, I was flying in, or I had witnessed, or I had squadron mates killed in mishaps. Never in combat, but in training, and show you how hard the training was to prepare for the combat. Um, and those were young guys, and my best friend Jim Malibu Reynolds. Malibu was a great guy. He was an academy graduate, very talented flyer. He was an aero engineering major, and he designed and built his own home built high G aerobatic airplane that he flew in air shows around the country. Just a tremendous guy with all the talent in the world. And one day out on the range in a big red flag exercise in the desert in Nevada, he made a mistake and he hit the ground and he died. Um, and that was changing for me. I was about 30 years old at that point, and I realized, we walk around, especially fighter pilots, we're indestructible, we're invincible. At least that's what our ego tells us. But then you realize that it can all end very quickly to any of us. Nothing's given. We don't have, we don't have all the time that we think.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so making the most of the time that you have right now and not putting off those things that are truly important to you. I hear people with bucket lists, and I go, well, that bucket list is just getting bigger and bigger, and you're not checking any of it off. It's truly important to you, then do it if you have the means to do it.
Yeah.
And if that relationship's important to you, then tell that person that that relationship's important to you today because you may not have tomorrow in that. And that's overused and it's kind of melodramatic in Hollywood, but it's true. And I saw that you know, at least 10 or 11 times in my 23 years of flying. So, that impacted me. So not in the sense of, I guess, anything that Malibu imparted on me, although he was truly a great friend. But the fact that his life was taken from him so early really changed the way that I looked at things and
Yeah.
how I approached them.
Yeah.
And how before I would worry about everything, I obsessing about, oh, how do people think of me and all those kind of things. And it was, now it's like, you know what, if no one's going to remember in 5 years, then it's just not that important.
Yeah.
And as long as you're being good and nice and you have integrity in how you live, you should be able to pursue those things that you want to pursue that bring you joy in life. And so I'd say, yeah, that's Ronald Reagan, my parents, and my friend Malibu, who passed away at a young age. So.
Yeah. Boy, I'll tell you, losing a friend like that completely unexpected. I just had a good friend of mine pass away completely unexpectedly last year in August and stuff. And he was a husband and a father to four
Mhm.
girls, And I'll tell you, you're right. It really it changes your perspective, and it really and it was so awesome to see the outpouring of love and support, financial support for his wife and children and
Right.
stuff, and but man, when that kind of stuff happens, you're right. It changes your perspective, and it just really allows us to look at like, well, what is most important, and like what you've said, it's the here and now. It's the relationships that we have with people in our life that we love and care about.
Mhm.
It's those, it's those business connections too that, in my life, my business connections. I mean, they're friends too,
Right.
and they're people that I care for and that I know about them and their families and their spouses and their kids and
Yeah.
and
And I
and you're
write
right.
a whole section in the book about that, saying, you spend an inordinate amount of your waking time at work usually when you're in your
Yeah,
working ages, and if you're not having fun at work, then you need to relook at what you're doing.
yeah, yeah,
Teams that get along, that trust and respect and have accountability with each other, and they actively listen, they actually hear what the other person's saying, and not already have their argument built up, but work together to find common ground.
yeah,
And then, that having that kind of fun at work, and that's why fighter pilots have it. I write about the squadron bar on Friday nights. It's just not, everyone getting together to drink. It's actually a ritual. It's a chance to bond. It's a chance to be with people that are going through a similar experience, and in a way that is non-retribution. It's a way to relax. It's a way to find that friendship and that bonding.
yeah.
And I encourage that. And I did in my own organizations. I learned more every day. I would take an hour every day to walk to everybody's offices or place of work, and go to the airplane and talk to the mechanics, the pilots, the engineers, the project managers. And I learned more in those one-on-one conversations than I did in any formal meetings about where we truly were with the status of a project or a program, or issues that were happening, or somebody that had done something tremendously well and just had not been recognized, came from those kind of one-on-one or small group meetings. And also, if the person wanted to talk about their family and what was going on in their life, then that was good too, because then they saw that I cared about them as a person, not just as an
Right.
employee. And it's okay to have that connection.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
you know, and and yeah, I mean it's important,
yeah.
and life should be about people and about connection, and that's what leadership is. It's about service. It's about serving
Absolutely.
the people that are working in a common goal or common mission with you.
Yeah,
And so yeah, it's that, I think that lesson of, it's time's not given, and so
that's right.
focus on the people that you're serving,
Yeah.
and focus on the mission that you're serving with those people,
Yeah.
and have fun doing it.
Amen. Amen. Well, Kyle, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation today. And for anybody that's listening to this right now, going, man, Kevin, I really like some of the stuff that Kyle shared. I like who he is. I like how he shows up. And man, maybe he might even be able to help us, or maybe they're thinking of somebody else that it might make sense for you to connect with. Any websites, any resources we can share with folks?
Yeah. So I have my company, Wild Sky Aerospace and Management Consulting, has a website,
Uh-huh.
Wild Sky. It's with a Y, so WYLDSKY dash
Okay.
consulting.com. So wildskyconsulting.com offers the services that I can provide either as a keynote speaker or as a consultant or advisor or a mentor slash coach
Okay.
for organizations and teams that are trying to build. So any of those services that I can provide. Also has links to Amazon books for my book, which is in the
Okay.
background there, A Sky
Yep.
Less Traveled, A Maverick's Life of Leadership, Resilience, and Pursuit of Purpose. And so that's one place. I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook. So, happy for anyone that wants to reach out and talk to me about what they read in the book, questions they have, or things that they liked or disliked. I'm happy to get that feedback because talk a lot in that book about debriefing, and debriefing is something that we should always do. And I would love to get that feedback to debrief myself on those things that I'm talking about.
Awesome.
But yeah, so excited for what's coming up, and again, thank you very, very much for having me on the podcast today.
Well, you are so welcome. I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation today. I am really stoked to get it out there and share it with a lot of other entrepreneurs, founders, CEOs. And thanks so much, Kyle. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate you.
All right, Kevin, thank you for having me on. It was a
You
pleasure.
bet.